This is Dr. Martin's lecture on Chapter 19, Section 5. I'm going to talk a little bit about the angiosperms, and I'm using a diagram from your textbook, figure 19-16. And this group is called the angiosperms. And I talked briefly about them last Thursday, I believe. These are the flowering plants. And here's the life cycle. We're going to go into more detail later about this life cycle, but for now, I want you to focus on which part represents the gametophytes and which represents the sporophytes. And remember that plants have what's called an alternation of generations, and there's a diploid form that cycles with a haploid form, which is, again, the sporophyte and then the gametophyte. So we're going to start here with the mature plant, the flowering plant. The reproductive parts are located in the flower. And here we have a diagram of a flower. And we're going to talk about the parts of a flower a little bit later. But basically, both the male and female parts are located within a flower. The male parts include the anthers and the filaments, and they're called stamens. That's a general word for all of the male reproductive structures. The term for the female part is the carpel. And what's important right now is that we're going to look at two different parts here. Within the carpel, or the female part, there is located an ovary, and within an ovary can be one or more ovules. We're going to enlarge that, and right here, this represents the ovule, and within the ovule, one ovule, is located an egg, and there's other cells located here. They're going to have different functions, but the egg is the female gamete, and it is located within tissue that's called the female gametophyte. And the egg is produced by meiosis. So we now go from a diploid to a haploid cycle. Within the male parts of the flower, we're going to look at the anthers, and those are the structures. They usually look kind of yellowish, and you'll see pollen grains coming off of them. The pollen grain represents the male gametophyte. And pollen grain contains the sperm, and they were developed or produced via meiosis, so they are also haploid. Fertilization is going to occur when the pollen grains land on a special structure of the flower. That's part of the female portion. And so here we've got a pollen grain at the very tip of this structure. What will happen is that the pollen grain will actually produce a structure called a pollen tube that will grow down this structure into the ovary, and that tube will carry the sperm. So the sperm will reach the egg through the pollen tube. When a sperm fertilizes the egg, we'll call that fertilization, we're going to produce a zygote. So the plant embryo is located here. Now we're back to the diploid form of the generation here, or the sporophyte. We'll come back to this fertilization a little bit later because we'll see that the sperm, another sperm actually fertilizes something else, but we're going to follow just the zygote. When the zygote starts to develop, it will stop at a certain point, but as it develops, the tissue around it, the ovary, will also start to change, and it will become the fruit. So the tissue, the ovary tissue will, the walls will thicken, different biochemical processes will go on in there, and within that is one or more seeds. The fruit, this is called a fruit, will fall from the tree or will be carried somewhere, and at some point the seed will become exposed, and if that seed lands in a good environment, it will start to germinate. And many years later, we have the tree, or the flowering plant. Remember that angiosperms include not just trees, but the flowering plants that you call flowers are also part of the angiosperms, as well as grasses that have flowers that aren't very conspicuous. All right, so the most important thing here is to distinguish where the gametophyte and where the sporophyte are. And again, the gametophyte's been really reduced to just a few number of cells, and those cells are located in the pollen grains and within the ovary of the flower. Okay, that's the end of my lecture part 1, and we'll continue in just a minute.